Hello, it's a me and it's a you, and this is a part 5 of our series on Spanish subjunctive. Today we're gonna cover even more advanced subjunctive triggers, which are called purpose and probability triggers, something that looks like this. Tal vez llueva mañana and a lo mejor llueve mañana. Here we have two triggers, tal vez and a lo mejor. Both mean maybe, but in the first sentence we trigger subjunctive for the verb llover, but in the second sentence we use a normal indicative mood. Looks weird, I agree, especially because translation does not change. But that's quite alright, we'll figure it out. Please make sure you watch parts 1 through 4 or you're not gonna understand anything. As always, don't forget to grab that sweet PDF and take that juicy quiz in the video description so that you can get some extra practice. Thank you for joining, and let's begin. Chapter 0. 2 categories, 1 video. Today's video will be split into 2 distinct parts. Part 1 is purpose triggers. These triggers explain why something is done or the goal behind a certain action. Lucky to us, they almost always trigger subjunctive, with just a couple of little traps. The purpose triggers we will be discussing today are para qué, a fin de qué, sin qué, and de modo qué, de manera qué. As you can see, some of them are grouped together because they are practically synonyms. Part 2 is gonna be about probability triggers. Here's where shit is gonna hit the fan. Probability triggers are all about how certain you are in what you're saying. The more certain you are, the more likely it's gonna be a normal indicative mood, otherwise we're gonna be dealing with subjunctive. It's basically a spectrum. The probability triggers we're gonna cover today are Ojalá, Puede que, Tal vez, Quizás, a lo mejor, Posiblemente, Probablemente. Sounds like a lot, but don't worry. As always, we will deal with everything together. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Para que, a fin de que. Both of these triggers mean so that or in order that, and they always trigger subjunctive, just like the most triggers in this section will. Why? Because these triggers introduce a purpose. It is a goal that hasn't been achieved at the moment of speaking. It's always looking forward, always uncertain whether the goal will actually be reached. This future uncertainty is what triggers subjunctive. Like I said, both para que and a fin de que mean so that or in order that. The only difference between them is the register. A fin de que is more formal, fancy and business-like. You'll see it in emails, formal documents, official announcements, but it's less common in casual speech. Lastly, most purpose triggers will follow the 2-subject structure from part 2 video about the WEIRDO Triggers. If you don't remember what it is, just give me a sec. Here's our first example. Yo trabajo para que tú ganes dinero. Here we have yo and tú as 2 subjects, trabajar and ganar as 2 verbs, and the conjunction que between them. In this case, conjunction que is a part of the trigger para que. This is what we know as a 2-subject structure. The verb in the main clause has to be conjugated in a normal indicative way, and the verb in the subordinate clause has to take subjunctive form. That's why we have ganes instead of ganas. Now, what are we supposed to do when we have only one subject doing 2 actions? In this case, we need to drop que and use the second verb in the infinitive form. So the sentence becomes Yo trabajo para ganar dinero. I work and I earn money. In this case, we don't need to trigger subjunctive because we don't even have a trigger to begin with. There's only one subject doing 2 actions. None of this should be new to you if you had watched my previous videos. I just need to make sure that we are on the same page. Let's look at more examples. Yo te explico para que tú entiendas. This is a 2-subject structure again, therefore para que triggers subjunctive for the verb entender, so we have entiendas instead of entiendes. Here's a similar sentence but with one subject doing 2 actions. Yo estudio para entender. Again, in cases like that, we do not need subjunctive at all, because there's no para que to begin with. I'm only showing you this to eliminate confusion. Now, like I said, a fin de que is used the same way as para que, just in a more formal setting. For example, te escribo a fin de que estés informado, and tienes que estudiar a fin de poder aprobar. You don't need to practice a fin de que extensively, just learn to recognize it when you see it and remember that it behaves like para que. Time to check our knowledge, my friends. I have 2 sentences for you. Yo llamo a mi madre para que escuche sus consejos. And yo llamo a mi madre para que ella sabe que estoy bien. You have 2 things to do. First, you need to decide whether you need to use para que or para without que. And second, you need to conjugate the second verb correctly. That is, choosing between the infinitive or subjunctive verb forms. Please pause the video if you need more time. 3, 2, 1, boom. So what do we have here? I hope you understand that the only real thing you need to do here is to understand whether we are dealing with a two-subject structure, that is, two people doing two actions, or one person doing two actions. This decides everything. In the first sentence, we have me as the only subject. So what do? I call my mother and I listen to her advice. This eliminates the need for para qué, which means we do not need subjunctive here. The infinitive will do just fine. So what we have is yo llamo a mi madre para escuchar sus consejos. In the second sentence, though, we have two subjects, me and my mom, and we have two actions that these subjects perform. I call and my mom knows. This tells us that we need to use para qué and therefore trigger subjunctive for the second verb, which gives us yo llamo a mi madre para que ella sepa que estoy bien. Sepa is the present subjunctive form of the verb saber, to know. That's it. Good job. Let's move to the next trigger. Chapter 2. Sin que. I know you are probably used to say sin without que if you want to say without, so why complicate things, am I right? Like here, for example. Marcos come sin pensar. A simple sentence that we've seen and used many times before in our Spanish journey. No need for que nor subjunctive, but why? We have one subject and two actions that this same subject performs, that is eating and thinking. Oh, so this is a one-subject structure where there's no need for subjunctive, where the second verb just takes the base infinitive form. But what if we add the second subject? Well, we may get something like this. Marcos come sin que nadie lo vea. See the difference? Here we have two subjects, Marcos and anyone, and their two actions, eating and seeing. So what is sin que actually? It describes something that doesn't happen or is avoided while something else occurs. Think of it as without this other thing happening, because the action in a sin que clause is either not happening or is being prevented. It is inherently hypothetical, which means it has to trigger subjunctive. That's why we have ver in our subordinate clause, which is a present subjunctive form of the verb ver, to see, instead of the normal indicative ve. Here are more examples. Hazlo sin que Carla lo sepa, and puedes quedarte sin que haya problemas. We are trying to prevent something from happening, kinda like setting a condition. In these cases, sin que reminds me of as long as phrase that we learned in the previous videos. These conditions cause uncertainty, and uncertainty triggers subjunctive. That's why we have sepa and haya. Let's test our knowledge by filling in the blanks. I have two sentences for you. Anna sale sin o sin que, desayunar, desayune. And Anna sale sin, or sin que, with su madre la ver, vea. Same as before, I want you to choose whether you need to use sin or sin que, and only after that you need to conjugate the second verb correctly by choosing either infinitive or subjunctive form. Let's go. 3, 2, 1, hacha! So what do we have here? In the first sentence, Anna is both leaving and having breakfast. This signals to us that there's no need for sin que, and therefore no need for subjunctive either. So what we have is Anna sale sin desayunar. Now, in the second sentence, we have Anna who leaves and her mother seeing, or rather not seeing her. This is the two-subject structure, which requires us to go all in and use sin que and then trigger subjunctive. Anna sale sin que su madre la vea. Not too hard, was it? Let's continue. Chapter 3. De modo que, de manera que. Both de modo que and de manera que work in the same way, but with a little trap. They have two translations, and as always, one translation triggers normal indicative mood, and the other will always trigger subjunctive. Nothing crazy though, so don't worry. Translation number 1. So that. When de modo que expresses a goal or intended result, it means that the action in a subordinate clause has not happened yet. In this case, de modo que and de manera que are translated as so that, and work exactly the same way as para que, meaning that they always trigger subjunctive. For example, habla despacio de modo que la gente te entienda. Organízalo de manera que sea más fácil. In both examples, we're asking someone to do something, and since this something has not happened yet, it means that we're expressing uncertainty and have to trigger subjunctive. Translation number 2. So, therefore, in such way that. When we express an actual outcome that already happened or some kind of a logical consequence, we gotta switch back to indicative. Why? Because here we're not describing a goal, therefore there's no uncertainty. In this case, de modo que and de manera que can be translated as so, therefore, and in such way that. For example, Marcos habló despacio de modo que lo entendimos, and Jake llegó tarde de manera que perdió la reunión. You see how we're just describing what actually happened instead of talking about the goal or purpose. We're describing something real and certain, and for that we do not need subjunctive. Here are two examples comparing both translations for de modo que and de manera que. Juan cierra la puerta de manera que nadie te vea, and Juan cerró la puerta de manera que nadie lo vio. In the first sentence, we're asking Juan to close the door so that nobody can see him. We know what we need, but the outcome of Juan closing the door has not happened yet. We don't know if he was seen or not. Not yet, at least. The verb ver, to see, takes present subjunctive form, which is ver. However, in the second sentence, we're describing something that we know already happened. There's no uncertainty here, and therefore no subjunctive needed. Test number 3. Let's see if I'm making any sense. I will give you two sentences, and you will have to conjugate the verbs correctly. Explícalo de manera que todos lo... And Marcus lo explicó de manera que todos lo... Do not let me down. 3, 2, 1. So what do we have here? In the first sentence, we're asking someone to explain something and make sure everyone understands it. We have stated the desired outcome, but as of right now, we don't know if this outcome is successful or not. Therefore, we have to use subjunctive after de manera que. Explícalo de manera que todos lo entiendan, where entiendan is the present subjunctive form of the verb entender, to understand. This brings us to the second sentence, where we describe the fact that whatever Marcus explained made everyone understand him. If it's a fact, then there is no need for subjunctive. Just a normal indicative mood. That's it. So what we have is Marcus lo explicó de manera que todos lo entendieron. That's it. I'm happy to announce that we're done with the purpose triggers, and now it's time to learn how probability triggers work. Get some rest, grab a popcorn, and let's proceed. Chapter 4. Introduction to probability triggers. Ojalá and puede que. In most of our triggers so far, the logic was always binary. For example, if we have two subjects doing two actions, we would 100% trigger subjunctive. Or if it's one subject doing two actions, then no subjunctive needed. Probability triggers work differently because they depend on the speaker's level of certainty. This will determine the mood. The logic is no longer binary, it is a spectrum or a sliding scale. Some triggers are attached to one end, meaning that they always trigger subjunctive or always stay indicative. Others float in the middle and can go either way, depending on how you feel in the moment. We will start simple with the stable triggers before getting to the harder floating ones. This chapter will cover ojalá and puede que. Trigger number 1, ojalá. Ojalá means I hope or I wish, and it always triggers subjunctive. In fact, we already covered it in part 2 of this series as a part of the WEIRDO acronym. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on it, so let's just do a little recap. The only thing you really need to remember is that ojalá can be used both with and without que after it. For example, ojalá llueva mañana and ojalá que llueva mañana. See, no difference whatsoever. Just don't forget to conjugate the verb correctly. It's llueva, not llueve. Here's one more example. Ojalá John gane mucho dinero and ojalá que John gane mucho dinero. That's it. Trigger number 2, puede que. Puede que means it's possible that or maybe, and just like ojalá, it always triggers subjunctive. Puede que introduces a possibility, but never a certainty. Forget about two-subject structure and drop in conjunction que. This is always subjunctive. For example, puede que llueva mañana, puede que Marcos tenga razón, puede que no vengan, puede que sea demasiado tarde. Nothing crazy, right? That's it for our chapter. I'm not gonna give you a test here because it's too easy. Let's just continue. Chapter 5. Tal vez, quizás. It's time to switch the gears. Tal vez and quizás both mean maybe or perhaps, and both of them can be used with indicative and subjunctive moods. This is the spectrum or sliding scale I was talking about before. The beauty of this is that you are entirely in control whether you want to use indicative or subjunctive here. It's all about how certain you feel in the moment. Let's look at some examples. Tal vez va a llover mañana and tal vez vaya a llover mañana. Look at these sentences. Both use tal vez and both are translated maybe it's going to rain tomorrow or it might rain tomorrow. The difference is how you, yes you, feel in the moment. And remember that it's a scale. You don't have to be 100% certain or 100% uncertain. As long as you feel more than 50% certain, you can use normal indicative mood, and if it's less than 50%, you should probably use subjunctive. In the first sentence, we are more certain that it will rain tomorrow. In your head, you are saying, I think it'll probably rain. I'm fairly confident. Maybe you watched the weather forecast and it said that there is an 80% chance of rain. This is your certainty. In the second sentence, though, we genuinely don't know. Maybe it'll rain, maybe it won't, but the sky is fucking gray. Weird. Again, the actual outcome on whether it's actually gonna rain does not matter. It's all about how you feel about what you are saying right now. Here's another set of examples. Quizás Marcus viene esta noche and quizás Marcus venga esta noche. Same idea. Either you strongly feel that Marcus might be coming tonight, or maybe you feel like he might come, but you are just not sure. You control the mood, because in this case the mood is you. Here's one fun fact I would like to mention. You might have seen the word quizá without s in the end and wondered, is it the same thing as quizás? Short answer is yes, so you can use them interchangeably. So both quizás Carla apruebe el examen and quizá Carla apruebe el examen are correct. There is an etymological explanation why both of them exist, but I don't care right now. This is it for this chapter. Hey, let's test our knowledge. I have just one sentence for you. Tal vez el vuelo sale or salga más tarde. All you need to do is to conjugate the verb salir correctly. But how are you gonna do that without any context? For that, I'm giving you two scenarios. A, the airline app says your flight is delayed. And B, you have not checked your flight status at all, you're just guessing. Conjugate the verb salir twice according to both scenarios. Let's go. 3, 2, 1. Woo! So, in the first scenario, we checked our app and found out that the flight is delayed. Seems like a certain piece of information, right? So how does it affect us? Apart from getting late to our destination, I mean. If we are sure about something, we have to use a normal indicative mood. Tal vez el vuelo sale más tarde. Now, in scenario B, we don't really know. We probably feel that something is wrong and our flight is just not coming. Since you have not checked the flight status at all, it means that we're just guessing and we're not certain. So what we have is tal vez el vuelo salga más tarde, where salga is the present subjunctive form of the verb salir, to leave. Good job, my friend. Let's continue. Chapter 6. A lo mejor. Our next trigger is a lo mejor, and it means maybe, just like tal vez and quizás. So why does it get its own chapter? The difference is that a lo mejor always triggers indicative. Yes, normal indicative mood. I know it looks like it should be on a spectrum or a scale, and it is. It's just, in case of a lo mejor, we are more certain about what we are saying. So the scale tips more towards certainty, just like tal vez and quizás when we feel certain. For example, a lo mejor Marcos ya sabe la respuesta. A lo mejor ellos tienen razón. A lo mejor no va a venir. You see, indicative and nothing else. That's it. Another test. Here are 3 sentences. Tal vez haber un problema. A lo mejor Marcos llegar tarde hoy. Quizás Carla no tener tiempo. As always, you just need to conjugate the verbs correctly. But I'm not giving you any scenarios this time. Think about all the different possibilities and what they can mean for how you express yourself. Let's go. 3, 2, 1. Bam. So in the first sentence we say maybe there's a problem by using tal vez. So what does it mean? It means that it's up to us to decide how certain we are about having a problem. So if I'm sure, I would say tal vez hay un problema. Otherwise, if I'm not certain, I can trigger subjunctive and say tal vez haya un problema. Both options are correct, and it's entirely up to you how to convey the mood. The translation does not change though. In the second sentence, we are saying maybe Marcus will arrive late today. But we are using a lo mejor to say maybe. And what does it mean? It means that we are sure, or rather we are more certain that we are uncertain about the whole situation. The sliding scale, remember? In case of a lo mejor, we can only use normal indicative mood as we've just learned. So what we have is a lo mejor Marcos llega tarde hoy. Lastly, we have maybe Carla doesn't have time, and we use quizás this time. Since quizás works the same way as tal vez, then the only thing we need to decide is how sure we are about the current situation and convey the mood accordingly. So what we have is quizás Carla no tiene tiempo or quizás Carla no tenga tiempo. Again, both are correct in this case. That's it. Good work. Let's proceed. Chapter 7. Posiblemente, probablemente. Rejoice, my friends! This is the last chapter for today, and it's an easy one, because both posiblemente and probablemente mean possibly and probably, as you might have guessed. And they work exactly as tal vez and quizás, meaning that it's you who decides whether to use indicative or subjunctive forms. It is you who's in control, and finally, for once, it's your feelings that matter. Let's start with posiblemente. You can say both posiblemente no hay clases mañana and posiblemente no haya clases mañana. Just as before, in the first sentence we are more sure than not that there is not gonna be any classes tomorrow. But in the second sentence we are more likely just guessing. Here's more. Posiblemente vamos a llegar antes de las 8. And posiblemente vayamos a llegar antes de las 8. Same thing, a sliding scale. How certain do you feel about arriving before 8 o'clock? If certain enough, use indicative vamos. If not, then subjunctive vayamos. Now let's switch to probablemente. Probablemente Marcus sabe la respuesta, and probablemente Marcus sepa la respuesta. There's one thing worth mentioning regarding probablemente. When we say probably, by definition we're more certain than we are not. According to what I've researched, yes, probablemente can be used easily with indicative and subjunctive depending on how you feel. But by definition, it seems like you're gonna see it used more with a normal indicative mood, simply because it already implies the higher certainty in what we are saying than perhaps or maybe. It still doesn't mean that you're 100% sure though, because we're still talking about a sliding scale, so be ready to at least not to freak out when you see subjunctive popping up. I don't think it matters that much, but I thought I would mention it. Here's two more examples. Probablemente ya están en camino, and probablemente ya estén en camino. Same thing, both are acceptable. Just remember that you are more likely to encounter the indicative mood than subjunctive when using probablemente. This is it, my bros. As always, let's do a quick recap and get the hell out of here. Today we have covered purpose and probability triggers. Was it fun? Probably not. Was it necessary? Hell yeah. Let's start with the purpose triggers. In chapter 1, we discussed how para que and a fin de que work. They describe a purpose, which means whatever we're talking about has not happened yet. Both of them are translated as so that and trigger subjunctive, as long as we have a two subject, two verb structure. Otherwise, you'll have to drop que and use infinitive. Trabajo para que mi familia tenga una buena vida. Te escribo a fin de que estés informado. The only difference is the register. A fin de que is used more in formal context. Chapter 2 was all about sin que, which means without, and it always triggers subjunctive. Again, only as long as we are dealing with the two subject structure. So you can say either salió sin que nadie lo viera or salió sin decir nada. The only difference is how many subjects are doing how many actions. If it's only one subject doing two actions, drop que and use infinitive. In chapter 3, we learned about the modo que and the manera que. They work slightly differently depending on what they are trying to express. Number 1, purpose. In this case, they are translated as so that and work exactly as para que, because purpose is describing something that has not happened yet. Therefore, we need to trigger subjunctive. Habla de modo que te entiendan. Number 2, result. This is something we already know happened. Here, the modo que will be translated as so, therefore, in such a way that. And since we're stating a fact, there's no need for subjunctive. Habló de modo que lo entendimos. That is all about purpose triggers. After that, we switched gears and went over probability triggers. In chapter 4, we introduced the concept of a sliding scale. It means that for some triggers, it is you who decides whether you should use indicative or subjunctive. It all depends on how sure you feel about what you are saying. Luckily, not all probability triggers are like this. Some of them are pretty straightforward. For example, Ojalá and Puede que. Both of them always trigger subjunctive, and I wouldn't overthink it if I were you. Ojalá tengamos buen tiempo el fin de semana. Puede que vaya a llover mañana. In chapter 5, we talked about Tal Vez and Quizás, both of which mean maybe or perhaps, and they trigger subjunctive only when you are really guessing something, when your certainty scale is below 50%. Otherwise, we use a normal indicative mood, so it's fine to say both. Tal vez Carla viene esta noche and tal vez Carla venga esta noche. It all depends on how certain you feel in the moment. Chapter 6, a lo mejor. It means maybe, but it always shows the uncertainty of 50% and above. Therefore, you will see it being used in a normal indicative mood. This is your point of stability. A lo mejor ellos tienen razón. Lastly, in chapter 7, we covered posiblemente and probablemente, both of which work exactly as tal vez and quizás. You got feelings? Posiblemente and probablemente will respect them. At least someone has to, am I right? Probablemente ya están en camino. Posiblemente no haya clases mañana. That's it. Hello again. How are you? Good? No good? Does it feel like you are drowning in so much information that your brain is about to explode? It will explode, and then, somehow, everything will start making sense. Do not give up, cabron. Now, this video is a bit different than the previous ones, because before we had a semi-clear rules on when to use subjunctive, when to trigger it. It was almost binary. However, today, with the probability triggers, we introduce the idea of a spectrum or a sliding scale, where there's genuinely no right or wrong answer. You have to be in control here. Does that terrify you? Or is it finally your time to shine? I would vote it's the second one, but you can continue bitching and complaining how hard subjunctive is. It's up to you, my friend. Don't forget to grab that sweet PDF and take the juicy quiz. Everything is here for you and for me to practice and get better. In the next part 6 video, we will focus on using subjunctive when we wanted to describe something unknown or even non-existent. The previous video can be found here, and the next one will be available right here once it's done. Thank you for watching, and see ya!